Now we are going to take a look at two sample resumes from the same individual. This resume is for a man named John Smith, who was recently released from San Quentin State prison. While in prison, he worked as a dishwasher in the kitchen and completed an associate's degree. Prior to prison, he worked for 6 months at KFC as a dishwasher, and prior to that in a warehouse for a little over a year. Overall, a fairly standard situation for many people out there. And in this situation, John is now applying to dishwashing jobs in his area. First, let's take a look at a very typical resume that John might put together by himself. It may be very similar to resumes you've put together without any guidance. Here we have a very typical resume template used by people all over the country who really don't have a lot of experience developing professional resumes. As a hiring manager, I get resumes like these all the time, especially for more entry-level positions. So what we're going to do now is to go through this line by line and make a few comments. And then also, we're going to think back to those questions we covered earlier in the video that we need to answer in a hiring manager's mind before moving on to the interview round. So for starters, it starts off pretty typical. We have John Smith, his name, and we have his email address. Unfortunately, in this case, John used a very unprofessional email address of johnlikes2party@email.com. You want to make sure that the email address you provide on your professional resume is also professional. If that means that you have to create a new email account just for your professional correspondence, then that's what you need to do. Because an email address like this, even though it's fun, it really doesn't set you up in the right spot from the beginning. So past the email address, we have an objective from John of, I want to be successful and move up in my career to make a lot of money. On the surface, that's a perfectly fine objective from John's point of view. I think that's what most of us want to do when we're applying for a job. We want to make money, we want to have a job, and that's about as far as it goes sometimes. Unfortunately, when you have an objective like this, you want to make sure that it's something that a hiring manager can respond to. And in this case, there's a couple things wrong with that. First, John spelled successful wrong, which really demonstrates that he has a bit of a lack of professionalism as well as a lack of attention to detail. Also, this objective really doesn't help him when it comes to getting the job. It doesn't show that he's more committed than anyone else out there, that he's more ambitious, just that he wants to move up and make money, which you can pretty much imply if you're a hiring manager, because that's what most people out there want to do. So we'll talk about objectives a little bit more when we're looking at the high quality resume template. Next, moving on to the experience. Let's see, John was a dishwasher at San Quentin State Prison, where he washed dishes, put dishes away, and cleaned the kitchen. Again, very straightforward, a list of 3 of his primary duties. Unfortunately, it really makes it difficult to understand how John was at his job. Was he a really good dishwasher? Did he break a lot of dishes? Was he always late? You really can't understand that from these very bare bones points here. Past that, we've got his education. So wonderful. He was able to get his associate's degree while he was in prison. He listed his GPA out here, which is a 2.0 GPA is kind of low. So usually if you have a low GPA, you just want to remove it altogether from your resume. So just leave it as Adams State University, class of 2018, associate's degree. So just leave that information out there and not the GPA. And then the rest here is pretty standard. Thomas Jefferson High, hobbies, and references available. So typically you don't want to include your hobbies unless you have extra space. Usually it's much better to include more details around your work experience or education, and you don't need to include the references available upon request that's implied. So let's think back to the questions that we covered in the previous section that we need the employer to be able to answer in their own head after reading a resume. So first, did John understand what is needed from this job? I think overall, he did an okay job with that. He's applying for a dishwashing position, and he made sure that it's very easy to see his dishwashing experience. So it's a very basic resume, but it's easy to come away knowing that John has worked as a dishwasher. Unfortunately, you can't tell how long he worked as a dishwasher because there aren't any dates, nor can you tell if he was actually good at his job. So I think overall for this question, he did okay, but he could definitely do better. Next, does John have the skills and education we need? So I think it's fair to say that based on this resume, he probably does have the skills and education. He has experience working as a dishwasher, and he has an associate's degree, which is probably more than you need to be a dishwasher. So I would say we can check the box that he has the skills, but there's a big opportunity to really demonstrate that he would be really good and produce results, which goes to the next question. Has this person produced results in the past? And based on this resume, you really can't say that he's produced much other than doing the minimum needed to keep his job as a dishwasher. So it may very well be that he was an incredible dishwasher who did a fantastic job, never broke dishes, was always ahead of the demand from the rest of the kitchen, did a really good job cleaning everything. That very well may be the case. Unfortunately, with this resume, you can't tell. So I would say you really can't say that he's produced results based on what he has right here. Next, is this person committed to this job? In his objective, he talks about wanting to be successful and move up in his career. So I think you can say he's a little bit committed, but really you can't pull anything else out from this resume that says he would be more committed than anyone else to this job. Next, is this person responsible and professional? Based on this resume, it's hard to say that John really is either responsible or professional. It's a very basic resume. We've got some spelling mistakes. We've got the John likes to party email address. And overall, it just kind of seems like a resume for someone who's not super professional. And especially with the spelling mistake so early on, it doesn't really show a lot of attention to detail or responsibility there. So I would say it's hard to say that John would be an overly responsible or professional individual. Okay, would he be a safety concern or a property concern? So I wouldn't say there's any major concerns about people's safety or property safety based on this resume. It is so simple, it's hard to really tell anything about John in that department other than he likes to party, which may lead to some property concerns. Or even safety concerns. It's definitely not a benefit. But overall, I wouldn't say that John has done anything to show that he's not a personal or property concern in ways that he could, through being more professional, through not having an email address about liking to party, those type of things. Next, would he respect authority? Well, based on his email address, he likes to party, which seems a little contrary to respecting authority, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he can't. We do see that he has worked in a kitchen environment while at San Quentin, so that's always a positive. But, overall, it doesn't really show that there's especially strong indicator that he's willing to respect authority, pay attention, listen to his managers. And there's certainly an opportunity for him to expand on his experience at San Quentin to show that he's able to do that. Also, when you have a low GPA, sometimes that can be construed as not being able to follow directions or respect authority, which is why if it is low, you want to remove it from your resume. So it's not always the case. Sometimes people just have difficulty either learning while in prison or just have some kind of learning challenges in general, which won't prohibit you from getting a lot of jobs, but you do want to minimize the visibility of those things on those resumes. And then last, would John be reliable? Based on this resume, it's hard to say that John would be a particularly reliable employee, or at least more reliable than a typical person or applicant. John likes to party. I know we keep talking about that, but that's a really negative thing that really comes up over and over again when we're trying to answer these questions in a hiring manager's mind. They want somebody reliable and they want someone professional. And with a resume like this, that's about as basic as it gets, with misspellings and other things that are a little bit like red flags, it definitely does not check that box in the hiring manager's mind that John would be a particularly reliable employee. Now let's take a look at this same resume from John Smith with the same experiences, same education, and see what it looks like when we put it in the format that we recommend. Now, as you can see immediately, a huge difference just in the way it's presented and the overall professionalism of this resume. Now, this is the template that we're going to share out below. You'll be able to download and use for yourself. And as you see, it could be a little overwhelming at first since there are a lot of different formatting things going on here, but it's very easy to use. Really you just drop in your own experiences and your own information and you're good to go. So don't be overwhelmed. And we're also going to be sharing in the next video how to customize it for yourself. So we'll walk you through the entire process of putting together a resume like this for yourself so that you will be very confident and able to create your own resume just like this one. So let's go through this second resume of John Smith and talk about where this is doing a much better job of the previous version to show a high level of professionalism as well as really emphasize the strongest aspects of John's experience, skills, and abilities. So let's start at the top. We have John Smith. We have his address, his phone number, and his email address. In this case, unlike the previous example, we actually have a phone number. A lot of times, employers are only going to reach out to you for interviews over the phone. They won't do it by email, so you need to make sure you have a phone number. It doesn't have to be yours. It can be a family member or of a friend. It just needs to be somewhere where they can get in contact with you and leave a phone message. Next, we have a very simple email address. So in the previous version, we had John likes to party. And in this one, it's very simple, just jsmith@gmail.com. Again, nothing you can read into this, nothing negative. There's really no way to have a email address that creates some kind of an advantage for you. So you really just want to make it as simple as possible so that it doesn't hurt you. So moving on, we have a very different overall format to this template for the resume than we did before. So with this one, it's designed to show your strongest attributes first and minimize any kind of either gaps in your work experience due to being in prison or just overall gaps in your work experience from not being able to find a job. So let's go through the qualifications summary. So here, this is the 5 aspects of your candidacy for this job that are the strongest. So what are the 5? If an employer could only remember 5 things from this resume, what are those 5? So first, we have 3 years of experience washing dishes in a high volume food service environment. So if you think back to the last resume where John basically just said he was a dishwasher at San Quentin. Now we know he has 3 years of experience washing dishes in a high volume service environment. So fast pace. So if this is a job that he's applying to that requires that, he's got that experience. Next, he efficiently led teams of up to 5 dishwashers to clean up to 3,000 dishes per shift. Now, let's look back at how he described his experience in the previous resume. So before, we just knew he washed dishes, put dishes away, and cleaned the kitchen. Pretty basic. Now we know that it was a high volume environment. He was actually leading a team of 5 other dishwashers, cleaning up to 3,000 dishes per shift. You can really understand what his experience was like much better with this level of detail. He also achieved 100% uptime with all major dishwashing equipment for the past 2 years. He's skilled at working quickly and efficiently while maintaining very high standards of cleanliness, and is extremely reliable with 0 unplanned absences in the past 3 years with a professional appearance. So after reading all that, don't you have a pretty good idea now of who John is as an employee? Not only is he a great dishwasher, but he also is able to maintain the equipment so that it's not breaking down. He's leading other people, other dishwashers at his job, and he's going to be someone that you can rely on to show up every day and look professional. So overall, a really strong start where you really get a good understanding of who John is. Past that section, we move on to the relevant skills. So now that we have an understanding of what his overall highlights are, this is some additional detail into that. So dishwashing and cleaning. He's able to efficiently and effectively provide high quality cleaning of dishes and kitchen items. He's cleaned and maintained a 2,000 square foot industrial kitchen and dishwashing station and achieved the lowest level of broken and damaged dishes over the past 3 years. So again, some great detail and background that really rounds out your understanding of the work that John has been doing. So he's in a big kitchen, 2,000 square feet. That's a very large kitchen. He's not breaking any of the dishes, and he's doing a great job cleaning not only the dishes, but also the other cleaning items. So thinking back to not just the basic responsibilities of a dishwashing job, this really expands out into the other areas, as do the next 2 sections. So we have equipment maintenance and repair, able to efficiently clean and maintain various brands of industrial dishwashing equipment, eliminated the needs of any new dishwashing equipment purchased for the past 2 years, and successfully repaired several industrial kitchen appliances. So this really shows additional value that John brings to the business that isn't just washing dishes. He can repair equipment. He can make equipment last longer. Like these ways where you can add more value to a business or to a hiring manager is really how you can overcome some of the negative aspects of having a record. If you're up for a job and it's between you and someone without a record, with the same experience, the same abilities, they're probably going to go with the person who doesn't have a record. But if you're able to demonstrate that you go above and beyond the typical duties, that you have the ability to do these extra things like repairing equipment or managing other people, it's almost a no-brainer at that point to hire you, because you're going to bring so much more value to the business than to the other guy who may just be doing the basics. So moving on to the next section, prep work and kitchen support. So again, this is thinking beyond just the typical dishwasher duties. And it shows that, John has the ability to do more than just the basics. So he performed serving, cleaning, and stocking duties in a cafeteria setting with great customer service, assisted cooks and kitchen staff with various food preparation tasks, and supervised stocking and ordering of kitchen cleaning supplies with 0 stockouts. So you'll notice through all of these bullet points throughout this section, John does a really great job of using numbers to describe things, like 2,000 square foot kitchen, 3 years, 2 years, 0 stockouts. It's always a good idea to use as many numbers to describe things as possible. It shows that you kind of understand how managers think, because oftentimes managers deal with numbers a lot more than just the frontline employees. And it really measures your capabilities and the value that you bring to the business. So as much as you can, try to quantify or use numbers to describe the value. Like, did you increase, for a dishwasher, did you reduce the number of hours needed to clean the dishes by, 2 hours a night? And if it's 2 hours a night for 200 nights a year, you reduced the amount of work needed by 400 hours a year, which is huge. Because if you're getting paid $15 an hour for 400 hours, that's a lot of money that you saved your company over that year just by making those small changes. And being able to include those numbers is really going to make you stand out as an employee. So moving on down here to the professional experience, as you can see, John didn't list his employer here as San Quentin State Prison. He listed it as State of California. So this is a small tip when putting together your resume. If you have any experience specifically in prison, especially maybe you worked as a dishwasher, maybe you worked in the laundry, maybe you worked as a cook, always put either the state you worked in, state of California, state of Missouri, or United States federal government, something like that. That doesn't make it immediately identifiable that you were in prison while you were performing those jobs. So then you've got what you did, the location, and the dates. You want to make sure you just put the year in there, unless you've got like several small jobs within the year. So you can just put 2016 instead of February to November 2016. You can just put the year. And since John already did such a great job of describing his experience up top here, he doesn't need to go into any more detail in the actual description of these individual tasks. So as you can see, we've got his primary experience really being his dishwashing experience while in prison. Prior to that, he worked as a dishwasher in the KFC, and then as a warehouse support for about a year also. So again, with this type of resume template, you get all the best aspects of your candidacy included first. So with a typical hiring manager, they spend about a minute going through a resume before making a decision one way or the other, either to include you in the interview candidates or to set your resume aside. So with this format, it's very easy to quickly skim through, see the best aspects of John's candidacy, and more than likely include him in the interview pile, since he was able to demonstrate that he has great experience, that he goes above and beyond, and that he'd probably be a pretty good employee. So moving on to the education section, we see Nothing super surprising here. It's just a better way of demonstrating the education, just looking much more professional. So we have the name of the university, the type of degree, and then the location and the year. So that's really all you need to include, especially as an adult. Unless you had a really good GPA, like something 3.0 or higher, then you might want to include your GPA in there, but otherwise you can just omit it. So one other thing worth mentioning is, so you want to have a one-page resume, but if you don't have any education outside of, even a high school degree or a GED, you can include, and you should include, certificates that you were able to get in prison or outside that are specific to the job you're applying to. So in this case, with applying for a dishwasher job, which also includes cleaning the kitchen and maintaining the equipment, John was able to get a maintenance certificate while he was in prison. So this is something that you would want to include in your resume as well, since it is directly applicable and maybe just enough to kind of push you over the top to get that interview or get hired. So don't downplay the experience that you're able to get in prison. Some prisons are very good, some don't have a lot of opportunity, but if you have any ability to get, or if you had any experience doing any kind of work, even if you weren't paid for it, that is still experience that can be very valuable when you're looking for a job. So now let's take a step back and think through those questions that we asked in the previous resume. So does this person understand what we need? I think based on this experience, it's very easy to tell that John has a great understanding of the qualities that make a great dishwasher, and I think he definitely understands what they're looking for. Does this person have the skills and education we need? I think definitely yes. We showed in his qualification summary as well as the relevant skills that he's got some great experience and he's willing to perform duties outside of the typical roles of just a dishwasher. So has this person produced results in the past? Again, I think John did a great job of demonstrating his ability to perform very highly in this role. The qualification summary alone, I think, really highlights that he's got 3 years of experience in a high volume kitchen. He's led a team of dishwashers. He's achieved 100% uptime on all major equipment, and he's extremely reliable. So moving on, is this person committed to their job? It's a little bit harder to tell that here, but I think, he was a dishwasher for the state of California for 2 years. He worked at Johnson's Heating for another year. So I think he has done a decent job of showing that he is committed to this job, since he has experience and he's applying to a job that he'd be a great fit for. Next, is this person responsible and professional? I think just looking at this resume, it certainly comes off that he is a responsible and professional person. The resume looks really good, very professional. Looks like somebody who's very responsible would put together. He has experience doing a lot of important dishwashing tasks, also managing people. And overall, he looks like he would be a very responsible employee. Okay, so are there any safety concerns or property concerns with John? There's nothing specific that jumps out saying that he would be. And based on his experience of not breaking dishes, managing other people, and just overall being willing to do more than the basic duties, I think he does a good job here of demonstrating that, even though he has a record, he would not be a safety concern or a property concern more than any of the other applicants out there. Will he respect authority? Looking at this resume, it seems like he has been a very high quality employee in the past, and even managing other people. And very rarely will anyone be put in charge of other people if they're not a good employee themselves. So I think John does a great job here of showing that he is willing to respect authority and would be a good employee in that sense. And then last but not least is, will he be reliable? Now there's one sentence in this resume that really demonstrates John's reliability. And this is usually something that's very good to include, especially if you're applying for a position that has a lot of turnover. And that's, John is extremely reliable. He had 0 unplanned absences in the past 3 years and always showed up with a professional appearance. So in cases like this, it can be useful sometimes to just outright answer that question. Say, yes, I'm extremely reliable, and here's why you should believe that. Because I haven't had an absence in 3 years that wasn't planned, and I'm always professional. And if you can honestly come out and say that, that'll go a long way to showing that you are a reliable employee, that any stereotypes that are out there around people with records don't apply to you, and that you should, at a minimum, move on to the interview round where you can talk in more detail about the value that you're going to be able to bring to the company.